See what I see. What is it that you see in Matthew chapter 24? The second coming of Jesus Christ, the rapture, the third temple of Jerusalem, the abomination of desolation, Israel becoming a nation and the beginning of a generation in 1948, a generation of wars, pestilences, famines, and earthquakes, false Christs and deceivers. Because if this is what you see in Matthew chapter 24, it is not what I see. I see a generation present in every generation since Jesus Christ began his preachings, but never fulfilling itself in all things written. I see a withholding of Satan by something withholding him, as we read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, KJV, verse 6. And now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. Verse 7. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. A what withholding Satan, containing him, in a space and time of his authority on earth and in the world, contained in a space and time of only a few verses and things in Matthew chapter 24 of every generation, so to restrain him and to contain him in his power and authority from fulfilling more things and verses, restraining him and containing him from gaining more authority over the world, so not to create further damage to the world and to the church, through his increasing activity of interfering in 2,000 years since Jesus Christ began his preachings. I see an activity of his Spirit that in just 4 verses of a generation of every generation since Jesus Christ began his preachings, that in its limits of its authority and power, contained and restrained, has brought upon the church, since its beginnings, every trial and tribulation, so to have it surrender to him, and in the worship of him in all his worldly manifestations, and through every lust. A spirit that could cause peoples and nations to hate themselves, so that they then bring wars against other peoples and nations. I see a mystery of iniquity that hides his presence from men, invisible to the eye, and manifests its presence through lies, a spirit that hides behind what is called human nature, so that the secular world believes him a fairy tale, a Halloween trick-or-treat, a horror movie, a work of fiction. A spirit of evil that has increased its activity in the world and in the church since Christ's resurrection, to rob Jesus Christ of his spiritual kingdom on earth, have it turn against itself, divide it, separate it, tear it to pieces, and then devour it in the worship of itself, as that spirit in all its manifestations in every generation. I see a spirit and mystery of iniquity that confined in only 4 verses of a chapter of 31 verses, of things that must find their fulfillment in a generation time. In just those 4 verses, and as a spirit, not as a man, but as a spirit, Satan withheld by power that contains him in his authority, as if he were under chains. Why is this what withholdeth, withholding Satan? It is withholding Satan from becoming a man. What are these 4 verses in Matthew chapter 24 of a time and things present and fulfilled in every generation, where the what withholdeth is withholding Satan from becoming a man? In the things we see written between verse 4 and 7. Matthew chapter 24, KJV, verse 4. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Verse 5. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. Verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. Why these 4 verses of things, and not just any verse or verses of things in Matthew chapter 24? Satan is being withheld by the what withholds him. Because what we read between verse 4 and 7 is what we have seen repeatedly in every generation since Jesus Christ began his preachings to this present time. After verse 7, the things we read have never come into fulfillment in church history, but also in world history, until our present generation came into being. Why, after verse 7, the things we read in Matthew chapter 24 have never come into fulfillment in church history, but also in world history? Because the son of perdition was not revealed through Titus in 70 AD. As I already explained in my previous video, this would mean that abomination of desolation we read in verse 15 is still future, but also everything and every verse after verse 15 has not fulfilled itself in any generation and has remained future in all generations, and is future from our present time. But not only that, with verse 4 and 7 witnessed in every generation, and nothing fulfilled beyond verse 7 in any previous generation, previous to our generation, because Satan is withheld by the what withholdeth him from revealing itself in the son of perdition. This would have that the things we see written from verse 9 to 31 are still future. Still future meaning until our present generation came into being. Because today we are not in verse 7, but somewhere between verse 12 and 14. What would this mean? It means that if the what withholdeth Satan from becoming a man is still withholding him, then somewhere between now and a few months, or at the most a few years, what is withholding Satan from becoming a man will set him free from its withholding him. Some of you are probably wondering why I skipped verse 8. Verse 8, KJV, all these are the beginning of sorrows. Imagine a withholding of Satan as if that withholding were to be a prison cell. The prison cell has a door. That door is verse 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Until that door is kept closed and under lock, Satan is withholdeth in the things we see between verse 4 and 7, generations that begin and end between verse 4 and 7, a power and authority restrained and contained in the things we see written between verse 4 and 7 in every generation, witnessed and experienced in every generation. But if the lock is removed and the door is opened, Satan will walk out of that prison cell of restrainment and containment of his authority and power. Satan will walk out of the things we see written from verse 4 to 7 and have all that was witnessed for mankind and the world since nations came into existence, and not just in 2,000 years since Jesus began his preachings, but since civilization came into existence. Everything witnessed and experienced so far, only the beginning of sorrows of what will come for that generation that had the what withholdeth to stop withholding, setting Satan free from restraints.